Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of On the Phone with, the first YouTube format by Out of. In each episode, we're going to have a chat together with a great protagonist of outdoor sports, and we will talk about early days, career struggles, achievements, but also suggestions. This is episode 1, and I have the pleasure of having with me a great freestyle skiing hero, X Game medalist, content creator, and award winning filmmaker. Ladies and gentlemen, from Boston, Massachusetts, Mr. Alex Hackel. Thank you, Alex, for being here and welcome. You are the very first guest in our very first episode of our new podcast, On the Phone with. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. This is awesome. It's a huge honor to be the first guest. It's very exciting.
And also, where are you? Because with you, this is a very tricky question, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and they have an event every year called Kings and Queens of Corbett's. And I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Corbett's is like it's like this 40-foot sort of like wind drift. Like so, it's like you have to jump off this wind drift into this famous couloir, and people have been jumping off of it in America since like the 60s or the 70s, and they bring in all the best skiers to jump off of it every year. And so this is my second time doing it. So I actually just jumped into it 2 days ago, and now I'm just here for a couple more days.
That is so cool. I actually watched a reel of you of your one of your runs. It's so crazy. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's hard to tell on video, but when you're standing at the top, you seriously feel like you're jumping off like the edge of the earth, and then the landing feels like flat. Like when you're looking like down at it, it feels like the drop is so big and the angle you have to land is like not as steep as you want. So it's like so intimidating. Like for the last like the 2 days before the event, like I'm so stressed. Like I'm looking at it like for an hour a day, and I'm just like, oh my god, is this gonna work? And then you jump it, and then it all lines up, and things go good, and everything. So it's fun to like that mental battle of like being some being
For
someplace,
sure.
knowing you have to jump on live TV and getting yourself amped up.
I mean, this is quite something said by you considering your background. I mean, you have been a professional skier. I think you we can still call you a professional skier, but you're a two times X Games medalist, kind of like a social media phenomena. Then you just happened to get into making videos and you became an award winning video maker. And then I don't know, I felt like you were maybe bored at times. So you decided to partner up with a thousand skiing and you also became kind of an entrepreneur. So saying that something is intimidating to you, I feel like it's saying a lot. So I
Definitely.
when I first met you and knowing your story, I feel like the first question that came to my mind was like, how? I mean, when I feel like when we're little and you love skiing and everyone is like, I would thinking out loud, I would love to make of my passion my everyday job. But you definitely went all in on that. So I was really curious to see if there was like a plan behind it, or if it was just luck or faith or even destiny, how it all pan out.
Definitely. I think probably all of the above. But to give you some backstory, so I grew up and I had dyslexia, like pretty severe dyslexia. So I didn't really have like an easy time learning in school. And I also grew up with something called idiopathic short stature, which is when your body has like a lack of human growth hormone. So, like when athletes get caught for taking human growth hormone, they're actually just taking medicine that was invented for people who had what I had, which is a deficiency in human growth hormone. So you have to inject your body with more human growth hormone to basically become like a normal person's level of human growth hormone. So that all kind of like just like added into this like I was the tiniest kid in my class by far. Like if I didn't take this human growth hormone medication, I would be like 5 foot fully grown. I'm now like 5'9", so it was like a huge difference. And then I had a really tough time in school. So I was actually like a pretty like I was like a bummer as a kid, like probably from like not as like a kid, but probably from the ages of like 10 to like 12. I was really depressed because I didn't really
Oh
feel
wow.
welcomed at school. I didn't really feel like I fit in. And then around that time is when I figured out how to do park skiing. And park skiing was just this like awesome thing where the community was super accepting, and my size didn't really matter that much because I was like a tiny kid, so I couldn't play like American football. I could do like soccer and whatnot, but soccer wasn't that big where I was from. So it was like the first time that I was like,
I
okay,
mean,
like
I'm
I'm
from
on.
Italy, so that sentence is really weird, but I get that. I totally get that.
No, no, I even am embarrassed calling it soccer to an Italian because I know how serious you guys take it. But I called American football football, so I couldn't. I had to just keep the rhythm going. But yeah, so it was like the first time I felt like I was on an even playing field in the sport, right? Because if you're really small, like you're not on an even playing field when you're playing a game of like um, physicality. And then like in the classroom too, if you have like dyslexia and you're in a classroom that's not built for dyslexic learning, you're also not on an even playing field. So it was like really easy to get like bummed out. And then when I got skiing, it was like the first thing that I felt like it was like completely even playing field, and all the effort that I was going to put into it, I was going to get back, and that there was not really this like these things in my way, you could say. And then I guess I just like started out just loving it. Like I didn't really have any ulterior motive besides that. That was just like the only thing that made me happy. Like I was completely bummed out about everything else except for skiing. So I just want to ski and ski. And then if you just want to ski and ski, all of a sudden you get good. And then when you get good and you get that confidence of doing something, then it gives so much purpose to other things. So like skiing gave me so much confidence in other areas of my life because it gave me this opportunity to gain that self-confidence. And then pretty much like it just became my identity. Like it sounds like super lame to say, but as a 14-year-old, skiing was my identity, and that was all I
It
wanted to
doesn't.
do, all I wanted to be associated with. And then like right around like 14, 15 is probably when skiing like it became that escape for me. It became the only thing I wanted to do. And then I realized that, like, okay, I think that I'm talented enough that I can make a professional career out of this if I play my cards right. So that's sort of like how I got into skiing. And then like 14, 15, like I almost didn't even like dare to say that I want to be a professional skier because it would like seem so daunting, but it was definitely like the goal because it was just the only thing I wanted to do at that point.
Wow. That is so inspiring. It's an aspect of sport that we often, I don't know, overlook, like the effect that it has also on other areas of life, like how it gives you confidence, how it helps you even open up. Especially, you mentioned you were around 10 or something. It's like that middle school period. I think that a lot of people agree that that period of lives is not the greatest, also because you're changing, everything is changing, your body, your mind, how you react to things is such a hard thing to go through. And sport is an amazing tool that we can have to go through that. So that's great. um so I loved also that you said that it just started out with passion, nothing else but passion. Really connect to that, just because sometimes when people ask like how we got into business, it's just a very simple question, and sometimes you feel like you're a little bit stupid because it sounds too simple to be true, but it actually it's all it takes sometimes to be really passionate about something, and then you just go and you make your own things about it. um and then, so at some point you decided that you wanted to ski all the time because it felt really good, and you got better and better, I assume, until a point in which you actually decided you wanted to start competing, right?
Definitely. So it kind of like it starts like slowly, right? So like I was always competing, I guess, but just at very small events. So like your local ski hill. I'm from outside of Boston, and then I grew up skiing at a pretty small resort compared to Italy and compared to the Western America and whatnot, called Sunday River, Maine. And they would, just have these tiny rail jams, and it was just like the local community. So like I probably did my first ski competition when I was like 12, and then I like sort of started doing like the smaller ski competitions, and then I went to a high school called Wendell's Academy, now called Y East Academy. And then when I went to that high school, I think I was 14, and that's when they had like this whole plan because it was like this high school where you could ski half the day, study half the day. and
Oh, that's
also they
awesome.
had um, like coaches that knew what they were doing and who had produced other pro skiers, right? So this is when like around 14 is when you get like put in the pipeline of like, okay, you're now skiing every day and you're with coaches, you're with other people. Like when I went to that school, I had three roommates. Two of my roommates were on the same Olympic podium in South Korea, and like between the three of us we have something like 14 or 15 X Games medals. So it
That's
was just
one
like the
heck of a
place.
group.
Yeah, it was. I'm
Wow.
actually one of my high school roommates is here right now with me in Jackson. We haven't seen each other in a couple of years, and I saw the other one in Utah last week. But it's absolutely crazy, and we just got to like feed off of each other. And we had this coach named Mike Hanley, and he was unbelievable coach. And him and I, we connected not immediately. Immediately, I thought he was crazy. But then I started listening to him, and I realized if I listen to this guy, like he's really gonna teach me so much stuff. And it just kind of like blossomed, and then I started going from like smaller competitions to medium competitions, and then next thing you know, at this time it was like the association of like free ski professionals, and I was ranked like 20th in the world in slope style, and I was competing in the highest level events, and it just sort of like was just this like basically from like 14 to 17 was just this like slow build, being around other people who were super good, being around a coach who knew what was doing, who believed in me, and then all of a sudden like at like 17 I'm competing in like the World Ski Invitational and stuff like that, and I was like really seeing
Just
like
like
that
that.
like exponential growth. But then there's always like the speed bumps, and it definitely wasn't like after 17 life was made. It was like that was just like the proving ground that I could do it at a high level, and then the following years was like figuring out how to do it sustainably and how to like do it in a way also where I got to keep that passion that I have for skiing as well as make it a career.
Yeah. Um, so I think that one of the questions that I was probably more curious to ask you was which were the skiers that influenced you the most? If you had to pick like three skiers and say, okay, these guys really inspire me and push my game, would they be?
So my favorite skier growing up, like beyond all other skiers, like it's almost like not even to the point of like one, two, and three. There was basically just one, and it was like Henrik Harlow, and it was I was
Oh,
like obsessed with Henrik Harlow, and he was by far like the biggest influence on how I dressed, style of tricks, how I thought about skiing. And then after him was probably like Clayton Vila. So Clayton Vila is a street skier, most famously, but he's also just a really good skier. And there's this street crew from New England, which is the part of America that I came from, called Stepped, who like they came on the scene and they really revolutionized street skiing. And he was kind of at the forefront of that crew and that revolution. And he had a style and he had a way of looking at skiing, and like the way that he put together his film parts uh, totally inspired me to like put together my film parts in that manner and with that amount of dedication and passion. And then I would say the next person who's probably the most influential on me was Magnus Grenier. And funnily enough, we're like friends, but I remember like these are like the three people where it's like I watched the way that they skied, and then I couldn't not like I couldn't look at skiing the same. Like after I watched Henrik ski for the first time, I couldn't go back and then watch somebody else and think that that was like interesting. Or like watching Clayton's parts, when you watched it, you couldn't watch somebody else's parts and be like, that was cool. You're like, well, I've just seen
yeah, it's
this.
like
This is
the
cool.
definition
And then
of game changer. When you see that and then you cannot
exactly.
unsee it. It's like
And then
it's a whole different thing.
When I saw Magnus's ski style, it's like the same thing. It's like this is cool. This is interesting. Like this is, you know, you just want to see more. You're inspired by it. You want to adapt your skiing to be in that style or to take inspiration of it. And those three people probably shaped my skiing the most.
That is awesome. These are, well, especially Henrik, but this is, I would say, a great choice of people to be inspired by for sure. And then I think like you kind of climbed the ladder of the competitions that you could do, and you ended up being, of course, at the very top, which I think it must be a good feeling, honestly, to compete in such a high performing environment to have such incredible riders also with you and doing the same jumps and pushing each other. I think that's one of the things that I like the most about freestyle is that it's more like even the athletes that are competing against each other, they don't really, yes, it is a competition, but it's more like a growth for the sport. Like let's grow the style of everyone to push the limits of a sport, and you do it together, and it kind of shows from the outside. And I think that's really beautiful. And then
Definitely. There's so much
at the,
collaboration, even within competition.
yeah, and then at some point you faded towards other ends. Let's say like competition was maybe a bit tired, or was it something that you didn't really enjoy anymore?
So what happened is so like at 17 I made like the US ski team and things were going really good. And then at 18 I like tore my ACL, or I think even like I think I tore my ACL when I was 17, but I didn't find out about it until I was like 18. And then that's a whole nother story. But and then that put like a big stop on things because I had this like sort of like from 14 to 17, everything was just like going in this line. And then we were talking also about like times in your life, right? Like when you're like 10 to 12, that's like a time in your life things are changing. When you're 18 to like 21, times are also changing. And so I by no means was like at the like tippy top of like slopestyle skiing. I was always good, but I was kind of like getting top tens. I wasn't really getting like podiums. And I knew that I had like a passion for film skiing because like all of the skiers that I just listed for you as my like biggest inspirations, they were film skiers. And then the part of America that I grew up in, like we don't have big mountains. We have like hills. Um, it was like always like on my mind that I wanted to make ski movies and film parts, and that's how I wanted like my legacy in skiing to be. And then it felt like it was like I was always doing these competitions as like a means to the end, if that makes sense. But then I was like, well,
Mhm.
what if I don't have to do this to get to there? What if I could just go straight from here to there? And a lot of people say that you can't do that. You can't find sponsors. Like if you're gonna do that, like that it's basically gonna be like you have to make a ski career competition before anyone will believe in you to film. But I kind of just realized like, okay, if I don't have my full heart in competition, well, I'm never gonna get past like the top 10 into the top three because it's like those guys, like they live and they breathe it. And if I'm living and breathing something else, doing this, and that's not going to work. So I sort of took a leap of faith, like when I was like 21, and I basically was like, okay, my competitive slopestyle career is stagnant, and I'm going to leave competitive skiing because it wasn't something that I was passionate about at the moment, and I could just see that I have one foot in, one foot out. So I just like I better just do every 2 feet in and see how it goes. So that's when I fully switched from slopestyle skiing to competitive skiing, and I made this like one film part called "Eat the Guts," and it was with so it's a part in the movie called "Eat the Guts," and it's with a bunch of my friends from New England, and we spent 2 years making the movie. And it was the like last 2 years I was competing, I was also making this movie on the side. So it was sort of like you know, I don't know, like my nest egg or like sort of this thing that I had brewing, and then that released. And then after that I stopped competing, and then I just like fully built upon that momentum. That was like sort of like the thing that launched my like street skiing career. And that movie like ended up like gaining like a lot of recognition. So that sort of like launched that career. So like right as I quit competing, I had this like thing that I was working on that I was super proud of, and then that released, and I just built that momentum. But I, in theory, like gave up on the dream of competing. And as a kid, I would always watch X Games. That was the highest form of sport in freestyle skiing, and I sort of like gave up on that dream. And then, funnily enough, they had this X Games real ski competition, which was street skiing. So then, after I quit competition skiing and then started making film parts, I then, like after 2 years, then qualified into the X Games for street skiing through this real ski thing. So then all of a sudden I was back in competition, but the competition was way different. You have like 2 months to make this 90-second video, and then it's six of the world's best, and you have so much freedom and creativity within these bounds. And I've truly found that like I think my real talent is taking like not just my skiing talent, but like my creativity and other talent, and then like putting it all together. So on a slope style course, I would never be able to show my full potential as a skier based on the fact that it was like the course was predetermined. But in a film part with so much area to have creativity and so much area to make things up on your own, that's when I can truly like show my potential because I can frame my skiing in the correct light. I can find the feature that makes it unique that only I can bring that flair to, if that makes sense. So this was competition skiing, but it was competition skiing in the thing that I was most passionate about and something that I felt like I had like a really like strong idea of what I wanted to do. So then I did it the first year and I got the bronze medal and I got fan favorite. So then I got invited back and then I did it the second year and then I got a silver medal and then they discontinued the competition series X Games Real Ski. But I ended up getting two X Games medals, which was pretty career changing. And it was really cool to just see. I just followed my thread of passion and followed the philosophy of like 2 feet in. And then when I did that, that's actually when I started gaining like much more success than when I was doing the like 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah. Yeah, the commitment definitely makes a difference. Well, and you said that you grew up watching the X Games and you did in fact actually win two X Games medals. So how did was it like a childhood dream? Like how did it feel to finally be able to do something that you loved so much? So the X Games were like following the idea that you had about skiing. So that must have felt incredible.
Definitely, it did feel incredible, and I'm like very fortunate because there's so much that can happen, right? Like there's so many people who have a dream of making the X Games and they never make the X Games. There's so many people who have a dream of making the X Games and they get hurt and they can't show their full potential. And both years that I was involved in X Games Real Ski, I put out a video part that was like at the cutting edge of what I could do. I got pretty damn lucky with my body and my health and the people around me and the team around me. And I really felt like I made like a huge impact. So like at the end, like you kind of just almost have to like pinch yourself because you're just like, wow, like that did work out. And like fuck hell yes, yes, like it did work out and this happens. And like it's funny because now I'm like a couple years removed. I've forgotten about it. It's actually in this conversation that I'm like remembering that feeling because like now it's always it's on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. But it is like quite surreal and something that I'm super super proud of, and that it really felt like that was like a culmination of like all the hard work and all the passion. And street skiing is such like this niche thing that the people who are in it, like we all know how much passion we have for it. And I think I hit my first street feature when I was like 13, and then I won like my last X Games medal when I was 25. So that was 12 years of like a skill and
12,
practicing a
12
skill.
years in the making, we could say.
Yeah, 12 years in the making, not even including the years learning how to ski. That was just 12 years of that discipline. So it's just to me that was I never thought about that until I was like talking with somebody and then I did realize like that was like 12 years of like loving street skiing and wanting to do it and pushing myself and fighting to put out these parts and all that stuff. And then 12 years later, you get the fruits of your labor, and then but then you're like you've forgotten about all those 12 years. If that makes sense,
Yeah.
because you did
Yeah.
it, and that's awesome.
There is a quote that I love by Casey Neistat that says that luck is when preparation meets timing. So you have this whole. So you started out with passion. You really put your 100% effort into it, and then things pan out, and that is it's life, but it's incredible. It's such a great story. And then because you met your fellows video makers, which are called the bunch, and I honestly I read the story of how you met them, and I thought it was quite interesting. So I don't know if you want to tell us more about it.
Definitely. So I met like who are now like my really good friends, the bunch, because I was in Mount Hood, Oregon. That's where I was going to high school. and it's a glacier, so it's actually a volcano that has, I guess it's technically like a class underneath a glacier, but it effectively has year-round skiing. And they have this ski pass called the Spring Pass, so you're able to ski something for like 2 months, from the month from
Okay.
like the end of April to the beginning of June, um, for like $100. Like it was like it's like the cheapest thing
What?
like ever, and all
$100?
others a
It's not
hundred
even a
dollars.
day pass. That's
Yeah, I
incredible.
mean, this was 10 years ago. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
inflation
Yeah,
probably hit that too, but it is one of the best like deals of all time. It was like if you skied twice, you paid off your pass. And
yeah,
all the other ski resorts were closed at this time. So they had like a complete monopoly. And then also it's in this beautiful like national forest in America, and there's tons of places to go camping. There's tons of like beautiful scenery and nature. So what happens would be like everybody would migrate there, right? So like the whole like group of passionate skiers who want to like keep progressing their skiing, they don't want to stop when April comes. They want to like keep the momentum going. And at
sure.
this time, this was like before Instagram, this was before social media, and like you really had to like be where the like community was, or else you weren't in the community because there wasn't ways to connect outside of it. And at that time, America had the biggest like free ski community. So all the Swedish people or all the Swedes would basically come to America for like 2 to 3 months at a time. So I ended up just like going to Mount Hood with my friends back home from New England, and then they're like, "Hey, yeah, like we met these like great guys. We're gonna go camping with them. They're from Sweden," and then that's how I ended up meeting like pretty much all the people from the bunch. And at that time, they'd already like released like 2 films or something like that, so they were already kind of in motion, and you could just get a vibe like immediately when meeting them that they just had this really cool perspective on skiing, really creative outlook. And I was definitely like very fascinated by like their, I don't want to say like their Swedish thinking, but they were definitely not like, they weren't like me and my friends back home. They had this different like take on things. So I was immediately just like kind of very intrigued, and then we just built this friendship. And then like 3 or 4 years later, basically, I got invited to basically like co-produce and ski in like a bunch movie, and then we sort of just like built that relationship. And then I think I co-produced and like skied in, I think it's like 4 or 5 movies, and then the last bunch movie that I co-produced and co-directed with my good friend Magnus, who was also one of my favorite skiers growing up, won like the movie of the year at the High Five Films Festival. So that was like super cool because I was like we were talking about with like the street skiing, how it's like okay, you know 12 years and then you get to that point, and then I'd been more or less like co-producing, trying to make ski movies happen, being a huge part of the not just like the skiing aspect, but like production and creative direction and all that stuff since I was like 17. And so that was like almost 10 years in the making as well. And like like the thing that was crazy was just like ski movies, that the industry is like not that big whatsoever. So I just got into it because I wanted a ski movie to ski in. So if I wanted to ski in a ski movie, nobody was inviting me to their movies, so I had to make a movie, pretty much, or I had to be involved in producing the movie because otherwise it wasn't gonna happen. So that's how everything started, and then it was just really cool to see that like that wasn't necessarily like my plan, if that makes sense. But then after a long time of like producing ski movies and having opinions on ski movies and how they should look and how they should feel and how they should be shot, to then see it win like movie of the year against film production companies that are super established, who have super huge budgets and all that stuff, that was like a real big like just like feeling of like wow, that's awesome, like this was really cool, and like all that hard work, uh and at the beginning what felt like a curse ended up being a blessing.
I love that you said that you got into ski movies because you wanted a ski movie to ski in. I feel like one could easily start from the other way around. Like I want to do a ski movie because I want us to watch a ski movie. This is it's a very interesting choice of words. I love it. I really love it. And
No,
also
no,
it feels like
it was pure just I wanted to showcase my skiing, so I had to have something to showcase my skiing in.
it makes absolutely sense. I also, it's funny because it sounds like everything you do kind of effortlessly becomes a very, very incredible, extremely high level. Like if you start producing, I don't know, if you start making writing books tomorrow morning, it's probably gonna end up winning some sort of award or something. It just feels like everything, every step that you're taking, and it's probably because of the passion and your dedication of each step of the way that you've taken that has brought you to have such an incredible amount of achievements. It's just it's incredible to watch from the outside. It's just like wow, it's mind blowing.
Definitely. Well, I would not say that I'm gonna be anytime soon a book writer, but I think it's all like I don't know. I was reading this book the other day, and it's basically like the small things that you do that then add up over time, right? So an example of this would be like brushing your teeth. Like if you brush your teeth every day or you don't, you wouldn't see the difference between brushing your teeth and not brushing your teeth. Maybe you it wouldn't feel that great, but probably it would take years or many years in order for you to even see the decay that's like
Yeah.
happening. But after 10 years there would be a huge difference. So I would say that that thing was like everything I just started off at a very small point, but then I was consistent with it when it came to skiing and when it came to making like ski movies, and I would do it every year and I would work to get better. And the first things I did sucked. Like the first street part I made
It's
was not winning any
so ugly.
awards.
I
It
mean,
was me, flailing around. And then next year I flailed less. And then same thing with producing ski movies. Like the first one that I helped produce, and producing my own parts didn't go that good. And then it got slightly better and slightly better, but I just stayed like consistent across time. And if you stay consistent across time, then your gains go like exponentially up. So that's like what I try and think about, and what I stress to myself is like consistency uh, is like super important, and the discipline to stay consistent over a long period of time is like more um, is like super important, and you have to try and transform your passion into something that helps you stay consistent, because like passion level can obviously, depending on how you're feeling that day or that morning or however, it can be up and down, but I don't think you can stay consistent without a level of passion. So it's like how can you harness that passion into consistency over a long period of time? And also like if you don't give up like if you I there's I like now in hindsight, and with the chapters being written, it's easy to look back and go, oh yeah, I was successful, that was great. But there's so many moments where it was like I could have stopped then, I could have stopped then, I could have stopped then. I was heartbroken here, heartbroken here, heartbroken here, and it was just like that ability to stay consistent over time and trust that like it was all going to happen in the plan. And like that was really difficult at times, because like when I quit competition skiing, I gave up winning an X Games medal, but then it ended up happening. Or like when I started creating ski movies, it felt like nobody wanted me in their ski movies. So like I'm learning the skill. I'm having to work twice as hard as somebody else who's just going to get invited to the ski movie, and all they're going to have to think about is skiing. But then that developed his own skill. So I feel like it's one of those things where it's like uh, you'll be a failure one day, a success the next day. I might be a failure tomorrow, success tomorrow, and just how to be consistent over time and let those like incremental gains then build over time.
yeah, I feel like probably consistency sometimes is more important than talent. It's just because talent gets you to a certain level effortlessly, maybe, but then at some point you're gonna find someone that has kind of the same talent, but that works every single day to get there, and that's really what makes a huge difference. The little things that you do every day that, like you said, build up. That is a very important life lesson, actually. Also the motivation part, because I oftentimes feel like someone says, okay, you turned your passion into your job, but then your passion might float around a little. You might have good days or bad days, but then it's your job, so you actually have to stay consistent, and that is the key. Day in, day out, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're doing, and that is. Sounds really easy said like this. To actually do it is a whole other set of sleeves, I would say. um, so holding about this thought, what are the three suggestions that you would give to someone who wants to make an actual job out of their passions?
The three suggestions that I would give to somebody who wants to make a job out of their passion, uh, I would probably say like the first thing is like consistency. We've just been talking about that, but staying consistent over time, because I truly believe like through like watching skiing, like I remember when I was like 14 and I could only do like a 720 and watching other 14-year-olds do double cork 1260s. And the idea that I was ever going to be able to catch up that progression just seemed insane. But then, like, people's commitment over time wavers, things happen, and basically staying consistent and focusing on yourself. I would also say focusing on yourself is like my next one, because it's like you have a certain amount of skill sets, and your skill sets are a derivative of like everything that you've like experienced in your life, from like what type of music your parents listen to how handy you are, how unhandy you are, how good you are at skiing, how good you are at other things that aren't your passion, and sort of the ways that you can take your passion, but then take your other skill set, because that's like your uniqueness is like the other things that you're able to do. Because like a lot of people are able to ski, or a lot of people are able to write a book or do a lot of like creative pursuits, but then it's like how can you then take the parts of your life that are unique to yourself and then use that and combine it with being good at something to then create this unique proposition, uh which is, you know, yourself and your experiences and what you can bring. And then I guess consistency and discipline is like sort of the same thing to some degree, but like discipline, like to be able to just focus on the things that are going to get you there, and to try and then give up the things that are not going to get you there, and pretty much figure out how you can focus to maximize the things that are giving you positive returns, and how to figure out how to let go of the things that are not giving you positive returns, and how to sort of stay consistent in, you know, really getting those, like really getting that ball going and staying disciplined and keeping it going. And I would say my third one, so I would say consistency and discipline is kind of like the same thing. Then what was my second one? I said it really good, but I almost
Focus on yourself.
focus on yourself. Then probably the last one is like a good night's sleep. A good night's sleep can fix anything. It's a miracle. And like a good night's sleep is like an example of like perspective and patience, you know, because it's like if you do something really good, you have a good night's sleep, then you know that high is gonna wear off and you're gonna be feeling back to square one. Or if you do something terrible, you think it's the world's over, you get a good night's sleep, it's gonna be better the next day. So good night's sleep and patience is the third one. So I would say consistency, focus on yourself, patience, and a good night's sleep.
That is awesome. I love the last one. Sometimes it sounds really easy. Sometimes it's really hard when you have maybe your own project and you put yourself 100% into it, and maybe things aren't going the greatest just because, I don't know, various reasons. And you're there laying in bed and you're like questioning all your life choices, looking at the movie of your life passing through your eyes, thinking like, did I do something? Did I screw up, or didn't I? So yeah, it's an advice that I should actually take more often, to be honest.
Then
Um,
one of the things I like to believe, or like that I think is like both a positive and a negative, is like absolute responsibility, right? So that you're responsible for everything good and bad. And then um, it's really unempowering to some degree and empowering in other degrees, because if you're scrolling through that movie of your life before bed, and then you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm responsible for all of that. But on the other hand, it's like, well, if I'm responsible for all that, then I'm able to fix it, right? Because if I could create this mess, I could fix this mess. And it's like this idea that like if you're responsible for everything, that in if you take responsibility for it, you're actually then empowering yourself, because if you got yourself in a mess, then you're have that same capability to get yourself out of it, and vice versa.
That is true. That is true. You're right. It's very empowering. 100%. Uh, and well, we're actually going towards the end of our talk, but I loved it. Actually, I the first time that you visited here at our headquarters, we spent a while talking. I remember it was fun, but there are 100,000 little nuances that I didn't know, and I really enjoyed this talk. And when you visited us, I think that one of the stories that you told me that I liked the most, and I still remember it, even though my memory is really, really bad, and anyone can actually confirm this, um, is that your parents met on a skiing trip.
Yeah, so my parents met on a ski trip to Slovenia, which is the Italian side of Zermatt, or sorry, the Matterhorn, Italian side of the Matterhorn. So they met there, and it was like one of those things where my dad grew up in Vermont, and he was like kind of like a lifelong skier, and my aunt was actually the one organizing the trip. So he got invited, and he went just like before you could just book things on Expedia or booking.com like that, and then book this and book that. So you had to like travel in groups. And then my mom grew up in Hawaii, definitely not a lifelong skier.
Oh wow.
So she was just starting. So they both ended up through like a friend of a friend living in Boston going on this trip to Slovenia. And then they actually, the real story is that they didn't really end up like hanging out with each other whatsoever, because my dad had his friends, my mom had her friends, and she was a bad skier in ski school, he was a good skier. But their flight got delayed in New York City on the way back, and then while being delayed, then my dad started talking to my mom and got her phone number, and then they started dating after. So I tell the story, they did technically meet on a ski trip to Slovenia. Uh, but then they actually really didn't start talking to each other until their flight got delayed back in America in New York City at the end of the trip. But that's
Doesn't
all
matter.
semantic.
Doesn't matter.
But, and then they decided, it was really funny because like my dad was a lifelong skier, but he didn't skiing wasn't integral to his childhood as it was to my childhood. And my mom grew up in Hawaii, but they just decided that skiing was the family sport. So I wasn't allowed to do hockey or basketball because that was ski season. And they bought a condo on the side of the mountain, like at the ski resort in Maine, and we would go every weekend with the whole family. And I think they just saw it as like a way that they got to spend time with their kids, and like that the family and friends, like my aunts and uncles would come, and I would go skiing all the time with my cousins. And I also like credit that to like that's where like the inception of enjoyment of skiing was just like at my ski condo with my whole family. I would have this like food card. So like it basically it's like a credit card that worked only at the ski lodges. So I was able to like at like a super young age, even like 9 or 10, be able to go out on my own. I would take a walkie-talkie because we didn't have cell phones back then, and I have a food card so I could eat as much pizza or chicken tenders as I wanted to. And then I would meet my friends on the ski mountain, and then we would ski together, and then maybe I'd ski with my dad for a little bit. And as a kid growing up, like in a city environment, like you can't just get like let loose on your own. You know, you have to have supervision. But on the ski mountain, and being able to just ski out the door, take a chairlift, ski back, that was like the inception of ski enjoyment. So that ski trip definitely, and how my parents met, somehow turned them into like that was the you know their passion that they shared together that they passed down to me.
Absolutely. I think that if you ask me, that is the definition of power, to give a kid a walkie-talkie and a food card. That's the end of the world. I mean, I grew up in a very similar way because I grew up in the city and the mountains were a couple of hours away of a drive. So I kind of share the same vision. So skiing meant also time with the family, and of course it binds up in creating incredible memories around skiing and the mountains, and that's of course helps.
Definitely,
Um,
I think about it now, or now I'm thinking about it, and it's like I would probably tell you, like, if I could take like a day of like the best snow of my entire life, or if I could take a day of having that like being 11 or 12 again, having my food cart, my walkie talkie, meeting up with my friends, and just being super happy it was the weekend, I'd probably take the like skiing the terrible mountain in Maine, not terrible, but the much worse snow conditions in Maine on a smaller mountain, but have that joy, that like that pure joy of freedom that it felt like when I was 12 than I would any conditions anywhere pretty much at this point.
That is so awesome. Um, this is gonna sound pretty cheesy, but I think like you have a very creative job. So I think also like not letting go of your inner child is probably one of the key things that you have to do to keep on having a creative mind. And this kind of, I don't know, I can see you as a kid with a walkie-talkie in your food car being super excited about going skiing with your friends. I love that. I can see in your work, I can see in the passion that you put into work, in the content you create, in the ideas that you have. I think it's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, and
Um,
obviously, I think that's where like our connection started. Was like we both are very passionate people, both are very dedicated people. What's going on out of is really cool, and to see the success that you guys have had is like the same feeling. So I feel like that's
Thank
like
you.
my parents met on the ski trip, and we met on a shared like vision of passion, dedication, and trying to push ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, thank you very much for this chat. It was really interesting to me. I honestly didn't think it was going to be this interesting just because I already know you and I already know the stories behind it. So but there were a lot of things that I didn't know either. So thank you very much for this time that you can dedicate it. And I hope that you have an amazing time back home in the USA.
My pleasure, and as always, it's great to talk to you.